I'll use your full names, gentlemen. John Goodwin and Ed Ryan Moore, all from Fulham's academy, with different roles and responsibilities at the club. Some you might be familiar with, some you might not be. So before we get into a couple of the questions tonight, guys, if I can ask you to introduce yourself, probably in the order that we've got the pictures up on the screen, if that's okay, gentlemen.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, Jonathan Griffin, Innovation Projects Manager. Been in the role for about 2.5, nearly 3 years now, I think. And basically working across 4 broad areas, which are research, data, product development, and sort of workflow. And then that's across the academy. So the academy currently has 8 departments, of which John and Ed are part of, and fun colleagues to work with. So I sort of have a large horizontal remit, which keeps things ever interesting, so to speak. And Playermaker is one of those very interesting projects that we've been working on for a couple of years. That's me.
To you, John?
Yeah, I'm head of Academy Sports Science, which puts me leading a team of 4 sports scientists from the under 9s up to the under 23s. I've been at Fulham for about a year and a half now.
Yes, thank you. And Ed?
Everyone, I am responsible mainly for the 13s to 16s. Just my role as a sports scientist. I've been at the club for nearly about 7 or 8 years now. Started off as an intern way back in the day, so I'm kind of Fulham through and through, really.
Nice to see that it's the white and blacks running through your veins as well.
Yes.
So look, I appreciate you 3 coming on board to join us for the SHEWINS, and it's nice just to try and get a different perspective and how your experienced heads can see transition from what you guys currently do on the men's side to how that might potentially impact and help people on the women's side as well. So feel free to chip in any point, any of you, with any questions. What I'll try and do, just because there's three of you, is just direct the questions to one of you to start off with, but feel free to all contribute at any point. So the first one I'll send over to you, John, just to start off with. What crossover in the development pathway do you see from the men's side of the game that could impact the women's side of the game? So kind of like what you guys doing. Again, we've spoken a fair bit about what you're doing there, but it'd be great if you could share that with the audience, please.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting question, actually, because sort of in thinking about the extent to which either it could or should, sort of what happens in the men's sport from 9s onwards. It's interesting because there's questions over whether it's even, whether we're even doing the right thing with the boys. So asking whether we should transfer that to the girls or that should lead what the girls should be doing becomes a funny one for me. But I thought it'd be relevant just to, I guess, think about how the boys and girls development programs currently diverge from each other as you move through some of those age groups, and maybe think about how they might converge in the future if it becomes relevant. Because if we go all the way down to the sort of pre-academy ages, 5 or so, then actually a lot of the opportunities for boys and girls are pretty similar at the moment. In fact, a lot of the opportunities are often overlapped, and we see a lot of the kids playing their sport together at those younger ages. And it isn't till we get to 9 where you see the sort of academies proper funneling, sort of inverted commas, what's seen as the talent at that point, which is obviously fairly early, and aiming to provide sort of the density of high quality practice partners and high quality coaching and high quality development opportunities to the boys that they think are sort of most able to take those opportunities effectively and develop into excellent players when they're older. And there are some similar club-based opportunities for females, but there's just less of them, and there's less net resource going into them, both in terms of finance and time. But even having said that, there are still loads of other, as we move through those early years of 9, 10, 11, 12, there's still loads of great grassroots opportunities for those females, just servicing a slightly smaller pool of players. And then there's the actually, to some extent, there's an impact of that early grab of males into young academies. To some extent, potentially serves as a barrier to late entry for a lot of players. So there are downsides to that early pull into the academy structure and the very sort of dense development opportunities that those younger players get early on compared to the players who don't get pulled into the academy structures early. And ironically, that disadvantage isn't there for females at the moment, that there isn't that barrier to later entry. But obviously that's at the expense of lots of females not having access to high-level programming, high-level coaching, high-level development opportunities. So I guess really the question at the moment seems to be one predominantly of resource. And when enough clubs see enough value in developing robust, explosive, athletic, senior level female players, then we will start to see more better resourced development pathways that reach further down the age groups. And there's a bit of a chicken and egg there, isn't there? Because the more dynamic the women's game becomes at club level, then likely the more attention it's going to receive and the more financial influence it can have. And also alongside that, you've got this ongoing process of just waiting for the evolution of sort of societal engagement with things that are appearing on their radar. And as society just chooses to engage over time, then we're going to see an increased demand to put resource into the development pathways for females. And then, of course, there's the potential societal influence of just saying, well, it should happen. It will happen because it should. And society might gradually pressure those development pathways to exist. And then also, I guess we're waiting on sort of the wider education of the public to want to engage young girls with sporting opportunities that football, as an example, can offer. So yeah, I don't know if I've sort of rambled around the question. I don't know if Ed or Jonathan have anything to add to that at the moment.
Appreciate that, John. It was like, again, I think it's really interesting the fact that like there is this kind of society on the entry to the academy. Like both boys and girls go from playing at a young age, like football matches together, and then all of a sudden under nines, it like gets cut off for the elite. Yeah. I suppose, I don't know, from a development point of view, I don't know, like, because do the Fulham women train at the same training venue as you guys at Fulham as well?
Yeah, obviously they're restricted in the time they're able to gain access to some of those facilities. So yeah, it's limited access, I guess, would be the appropriate way to characterize it, because we're a small site and the boys program fills an awful lot of the time that's available in the facilities that are there.
Cool. Griff or Ed, anything to add?
I think just following on from John's point, I think the big thing for me, I think, is the influence that the women's Premiership has actually brought in terms of just the focus on women's football and the quality that it has. So you talk to a number of people, let's say, in the source sports science roles out there, and they're working away. And there's this trickle-down effect, and a lot of those people have come through the men's game. So there will be I'm not going to comment whether that's good or bad, but I think the point there is there'll be a lot of processes, a lot of thought processes that'll be transferring across. I think we've got to be careful in terms of maybe that side of things, but the big thing for me is just the quality of football that's currently been shown at the top end of the game is going to be very much an inspiration for young women coming through. And I think that links into what John was saying, is that was it from the age of 14, correct me if I'm wrong, for girls in terms of the academy structure, but it'll naturally come down over time once that value, in inverted commas, is actually deemed such that there's an opportunity for a greater capacity within the system to offer more value to younger age groups. So I don't think the women's game is necessarily in a particularly bad place. I think the inspiration just needs to continue to trickle down. I think the interesting thing for me is how again, I haven't worked with professional in a professional women's club, but how much of the processes are valid in terms of crossover. So how much tweaking actually needs to occur. So if we're to take a framework from the men's side of things and overlay that across a women's game, how much of that actually translates across. And I think we're starting to see in a lot of the science that's coming out, and I know you've had some speakers today and probably later on as well, that there are a lot of areas that science has missed out on women, because we've been so gender biased towards a lot of the participants in scientific experiments. So I think there's a great opportunity for the women's game, because there's a lot of high quality. I think there's a great opportunity there in terms of a lot of new information going to come out. And I think some of the great things that I'm I get to speak to Fulham's coach a lot, Steve J, and when you have quality coaches like him wanting to work in the women's game, and we are further down the chain than, let's say, an Arsenal or a Man City, etc. I think there's a lot of great opportunity for young girls coming through the system. So I think the women's game is hopefully only going to get better, but I think it's a great opportunity for a young 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old girl coming into the game now. I think I'll be pretty excited for them over the next couple of years.
Yeah, Griff, I was just going to say, just to jump on Griff's point about the inspiration of the quality of the game being such an influential factor, I think your success becomes even more apparent when gender becomes an interesting issue in the analysis of football. And actually, I just think about my 9-year-old. The reason my then 9-year-old is now playing football is because he was so inspired by watching the Women's World Cup. And the journey of the England team through that competition. It was women's football that got my son into football. And I think when gender's not the issue, it's just watching great football, I think that's when we know things are in the right place.
And that's really refreshing to hear. Like, the Women's World Cup was really powerful for us, and just the togetherness of the nation really supporting the national team. And that's why it was great to hear from Phil and Dawn earlier as well about their approaches. And I suppose going back to what you said, Griff, just about you speak to the women's coach quite a lot, which is great to hear. Are there any shared processes that you guys do between the men's and the women's side?
I don't work closely with the women's side, so I think in terms of the detail, I wouldn't know the exact details, but I think the thing to make everybody aware is that the women's team is on its own journey insofar as that we're at a different level and we're working through the slightly lower leagues. I know from a broad process perspective, if you look at from a coaching perspective, Steve J is an outstanding young coach. So he is working his way through the badges. So the application of really good coaching process is being applied to those women. And Magali at Playermaker plays for Fulham, and hopefully she will be able to attest to that. Beyond that, and this goes to John's point, the opportunities for the women in some of the other areas, let's say gym access and things like that, are limited relative to other areas of the academy, and that's as much to do with the fact that those women are out working and they play as amateurs as it is to anything else as well. So we're having, what we do very well on our side, I think, is we've got a very small, unbelievably dynamic and incredibly engaging, fun site. It's a busy site. You put down there, Steve. So our women certainly get access to all of that. But I think it's very much appropriate to where they are and where they're trying to get to. And I think that's the important point. At that point, I'd actually say, so our women they've been using Playermaker actually for about the last season or so. They've got gym access. There's some medical access coming on board. And again, with all the coaching process side of things, the broad framework, I think, is in a really good place. And I know what Mike, the CEO down at the foundation, who oversees and has responsibility for the women's side. The ultimate goal is we're looking to provide a framework which is appropriate at the level they're at to get them to the next level. then there has to be an appropriate reevaluation at the next level to get them to whatever level, again, the club and the women actually want to move to. So in that sense, there are a number of processes that cross apart, but it's relative to their particular needs. And sort of the dynamicism down at the club. So, Playermaker is certainly a core part of that. I don't know how many women's teams you have using Playermaker over here, but I know that Steve is leveraging and enjoying engaging with the data on that side, certainly from the women's perspective.
No, thank you for that, Griffin. I think now it's kind of like, if we take the focus back to what you guys are doing, like as part of the Fulham Men's Academy, and then that way the audience can potentially maybe take some ideas and inspirations from that as well, really. So when you look at the athlete development profiles of the United 16s and developing that, how do you go about doing that?
I guess the biggest thing for me, and to keep tying this into the gender-related topic, is just that the program we run, I would see as precisely appropriate regardless of gender. Like the entirety of it would be transferable. And from my read of sort of what we understand about gender differences, the differences within our athletes and within those populations are much, much bigger than the differences we see between genders as cohorts. And in terms of creating robust, explosive, high-performing athletes as they mature, getting early exposure to highly effective, high-intensity development programs with well-trained expert staff able to guide players to an effective program is the single most fundamental requirement to get those players there. And that's not then a gender differentiating issue. So all the other factors around, potential differences in anatomy or hormonal variance or anything else we look at are all, certainly initially and at the younger ages and earlier stages of development, very much secondary to the fact that we need to just be building good athletes and giving young girls opportunities the same as many young boys are getting to just become fantastic athletes. Having said that, if I look at our 9 to 12s, I guess Ed's better set to talk about the sort of up towards the 16 set of ages, because that tends to be the group that he's more focused on, so maybe he'll chip in at that point. But if I pull down to our foundation phase, the 9 to 12s, and just to caveat that by saying I'm talking about it from a sports science, strength and conditioning perspective, not a coaching perspective. So the view that I'm describing this in is narrow. Our development process is basically split into 3 threads of activity that we try and make sure are happening for all of our players. So one is called football movement, and that's a set of practices that are aligned to the front end of football sessions. We've got multi-sport, which I think most clubs do. So I'll talk a little bit about how we choose to do that. And then we've got an avenue of trying to have parental contact and support around the activities that players do outside of the club. So football movement that precedes football training is basically about trying to build fundamental aspects of movement and transition them into football specific practices. So we take aspects of how we're helping the athletes understand how to use their body effectively, in terms of contact situations, speed and agility situations, invasion games of different types, and then gradually merging those from having a fairly generic shape at the start of a practice session and moulding that into the front end of a football practice so that they try to understand some transitioning of the general skills they're learning into a football setting. Then our multi-sport, we'd taken a step forward a few years back with the introduction of multi-sport in the first place, which at the time I think, Griff, you were heavily involved with.
Yeah.
And that involved some extended periods of us bringing outside coaches in to give the boys exposure to some different types of sporting opportunities, and there were lots of benefits to that. So there were different coaches who came with slightly different perspectives on their values, came with slightly different coaching styles. It was just a different set of eyes on the players, which changes the way they approach the session. And also, obviously, they were delivering different content, which exposed the boys to different stuff. But the way we've moved to evolve multi-sport now is to try and be more strategic in the skills that we take from those multi-sport settings. So we looked at sort of the multi-sport environment, or the array of multi-sport opportunities that are available to us across all the different types of invasion and ball sports that are available, the different types of contact sports, gymnastic sports, and try to pull from those sets of skills that we thought gave us the most sort of comprehensive overview of the different types of movement challenges we wanted to have the players exposed to. And in the end, we broke those down into challenges that challenge the athletes, the boys, to move their body in space. So those tend to be things that are more gymnastically orientated, for example. Things where their body is in contact, so things like sort of wrestling and contact situations. And then also situations where they're trying to utilize their awareness of peripheral vision and space and time in sort of invasion settings. And we look to pull a set of different skills from all those environments and then accumulate them into more dense practices. So rather than spending a few weeks learning how to play rugby might show up in several different settings with different components of the rugby skills being pulled as and where we think they're useful or transferable to give the boys a complete toolbox. And the last one I was going to mention was this parental support, which is one we're at the very early stages of starting. But with those younger age groups, those boys spend most of their week not with us. And what we want to help parents to understand and achieve is sort of a broad set of social and physical opportunities outside of the sport club. So engaging in environments where they're getting to do activities with different groups of kids. If it's in a formal sport environment with different coaches learning different skills. And gradually we want to try and facilitate helping parents achieve that in a low stress, because parenting can be quite a stressful thing, trying to help them achieve those things in a low stress way. Ed, do you want to jump onto the... Yeah.
Yeah,
parenting's a bit more stressful now at the minute as well, isn't it?
Yeah, so in the YDP, then when we get to 13, we kind of try and progress those kind of fundamental skills which we aim to develop in our multi-sports football movement in the FP by kind of taking them into more of a gym-based context then. So we're very fortunate at Fulham that we've got lots of access to the players to do our physical development work. So we'll have 2 40-minute sessions a week where we'll work with each age group on always some kind of Olympic lift derivative. My personal belief on that is that it's a good kind of movement challenge, as well as all of the other benefits that you can get from that. And then to kind of solidify the fundamental strength movements in those sessions. So that's more of our gym-based kind of sessions. We also have a tactical periodization model where which we've developed with the coaches, which then maps our kind of technical focus of a football session with a physical development capacity on the field. So if we are doing a large and tactical day with the players, and we know that in those sessions they're going to be in a large space, potentially covering larger distances at higher speeds, we'll do at the start of those sessions our speed work, our max velocity and acceleration work, and then on our more tight and technical days we'll work on our agility and change of direction skills. So we try and map those on alongside the football as well. And the other thing which I think may be a bit more unique to Fulham is that we have IDP sessions. So that's an individual development plan where players will have 40 minutes, again, additional to the 2 other 40-minute sessions, to get much more kind of one-to-one attention on a specific target, which that may be. So that can be anything from developing their movement complexity, their movement performance skills, or developing speed and agility, or maybe working on a more football specific skill with the coaches. And that's basically progressed gradually from 13s up to 16s, along with kind of developments in growth and maturation and training complexity. But there's always these kind of recurring themes throughout the whole program that kind of go from the foundation phase as a pipeline through the YDP, and then hopefully up into the PDP and beyond. Don't know if you guys have anything else to add on to that.
If not, then thank you very much, Ed and John, for sharing that again. Like it's a good insight into like how you progress and develop the players throughout the academy as well. So we're into the last few minutes of the Q&A now. So just really probably to finish off, like the question that I'll finish off with is kind of what kind of useful things for you guys that you feel you can share now are you trying to research or gain insights into? And I suppose that might be more directed to you, Griff, given your role in that. But again, any insights or things that you feel might be relevant to the audience to understand, that'd be great to share.
We're really fortunate in that the opportunity that we've been given is to go and do some good high quality research. So we've had a rebrand, a rebuild of our research process about two and a half years ago, which was the first thing I did when we came in. And really what that means now is we've got, Ed is currently doing his PhD at the moment, is a good example. We got staff doing PhDs and MScs. We're looking to do internal work around validity, reliability on certain processes and products, etc. We've got external relationships with PhDs and MScs as well. So we've got a pretty comprehensive coverage there, and then that works across our 8 departments. So we've recently just finished and hopefully about to get published some work that we've done on leadership development. There's so that sort of sits within sort of that psych educational end of things. We've been Amy Price has done quite a lot of work with us previously as part of her PhD and the sort of gamification side of things. So there's a lot going on. I suppose the one area that we will be looking at, and you'll be aware of this, Steve, because we're talking to you about it, is work with Playermaker. So we've just COVID-19 unfortunately put an end to a little bit of work that we've been doing over the last number of weeks, well, certainly since Christmas, where we've been looking at and this ties in with what Ed said earlier on, sort of physical outputs across different sized areas, so like tight and technical and large and medium size, etc. So trying to keep areas relatively the same across the age groups from 12 to 16, and looking at particularly mechanical loading. John, as many people will probably realize, he's not only a philosopher around sort of this area, but he's a leading researcher in sort of speed-based mechanics, etc. So mechanical loading, and I'll let John speak a bit more if he wishes to on that, is deemed a big load aspect. There's a big area around load that we don't, and I think you'd agree on this, that there's not a lot of evidence out there, and we think that the Playermaker device could certainly give us some more insights, particularly around those younger age groups around 12 to 16, which I think when you start to layer in things like growth and maturation, it becomes pretty important to understand loading, the impact of that on different aspects of maturity, and as John said, just the opportunity to help develop more better athletes coming through the process. And if we can individualize that, because that's one of our own mantras here at Fulham, then that's definitely our aim as well. So trying to get an understanding of mechanical loading within our 12 to 16s, both absolute and relative, is certainly a key area, and hopefully we'll get the other side of this lockdown and we'll be able to continue that work with you guys.
Cheers, Griff. John, Ed, any more comments just before we wrap up?
No, nothing from me, just for the sake of time.
No worries. Appreciate the three of your time. Really good insights into